session. So the topic that we've chosen for today's session is a cybersecurity framework. Now, as we speak, there's a quantum leap in terms of how organizations are operating and running business per se. Now, we're talking about organizations that have been archaically known to run business from their organization and on prem, all of a sudden moving to a zone where it is a must have or a demand by the present situation for you to get working remotely, and the whole logistics around it is definitely quite a lot to cover in a very small span of time. Now, with respect to how security has been architectured in organizations around the world all along, it's always been with on-premise systems in place. And talk about SIM solutions, talk about your firewall rules, talk about your cybersecurity approach, always it is about on-prem first. Now, you must have read statistics, you must have seen surveys, all of that points to just one direction, where your users are on the cloud right now as we speak, and organizations are adopting tools like Office 365 or Microsoft Teams for that matter, just so that they can get your users all collaborated. Now, what is the big challenge right here? The landscape is very different because, for one, figuring out what are these new attack variables, figuring out what are these new threat variables becomes a lot more difficult. Back in the day, when your users were within your perimeter, it was easy to contain any sort of activity that was going on. But now when your users are logging in from their home networks, we know how unsafe home networks can be. Not just that, it's also about not bringing your users' own devices to work, but also bringing their own vulnerabilities along with them as they join work. Now, this is a very tough time for cybersecurity leaders around the world. I keep speaking to a lot of CIOs and CTOs, and one common thing that I keep hearing about is how attackers are taking advantage of the situation. Now, we're talking about users who are the weakest link in the security chain. Now, these are the same set of users who wrote their passwords on a piece of paper or a sticky note and had it stuck right on top of their desktop while they were at work. Now, how exactly are we supposed to trust these users with resources, and that too when they're accessing them remotely? That is a very big consideration that you need to have in mind. So today's session is essentially going to do two things: give you a very clear-cut cybersecurity framework, and I'm going to try and bring in insights from the last 120 days of remote working. I've personally been working almost about for 4 months now remotely. My entire organization, we are about 8,000 folks big, and all of us have been working remotely. We've helped a lot of organizations go remote too, and I'm going to bring in a couple of my learnings, try put that into the 5-step framework that I have for you. Now, the NIST documentation that we'll be talking through today's session is a 55-page long documentation. Definitely a lot of verbiage, but much better than other regulations that are out there. So NIST is more of a recommendation than a regulation, and if you can kind of start looking at it as a recommendation, a lot of your regulations, be it CCPA, the ones that came up recently, or HIPAA or other regulations, also become a cakewalk. That is the agenda for today's session. And understanding that users are working this way is very, very important, because you necessarily cannot trust your users anymore with the same level of access that they used to have back in the day. You cannot second guess the whole factor that there are attackers out there waiting for that one opportunity for your users to get a little slacky and get that one opportunity and get into your system. We are talking about breaches that are on the rise. As you keep tuning into news, the one common thing that we keep hearing about is how attackers are stooping down to take advantage of the whole COVID situation, whole pandemic, and initiating attacks themed COVID. There are phishing attacks sent out by attackers with emails that talk about COVID and talk about some regulation, talk about from the World Health Organization, a notice from them, maybe an attachment that says cure for COVID, what not. And in fact, as I speak, even from where I'm presenting to you today from India, we had a very classic case happening about 2 weeks back, where one of the biggest financial institutions in the country underwent a great deal of trouble in containing a COVID-themed phishing attack. Now, as we speak, it is becoming a lot more difficult to guess your attackers and how exactly are they going to take advantage of the situation, while we have users who are very predictable. And the whole deal with working remotely makes it a lot more difficult because it's not the usual course. Usual behavior definitely is not something that you can expect from your users. And all that they want is, in fact, as you notice, these attackers are going to the extent of tracking down critical stakeholders in your organization, keeping a tab on their home Wi-Fi's, trying to crack their security of home internets and home Wi-Fi's, and trying to get into your corporate network. That is very much possible as we speak. So the whole idea of how to contain this becomes very, very difficult, and it's a very volatile environment as we speak. And a lot of us are still in the phase of learning to figure out how to tackle this, while your attackers are constantly in the lookout for loopholes. Now, through and through, majority of these attacks are targeted towards data security. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a very simple model where, if we get this model right, most of your data security problems are going to be resolved. We are trying to understand where data essentially fits into cybersecurity, talking about availability as the most important reason. Now, when it's about availability, your users want priority access to a lot of resources that were easily accessible while they were at work. For the want of easy access, for the want of better business continuity, IT is pushed to give your users access over the cloud, maybe on OneDrive, maybe on other shares online. And this isn't as easily trackable as how things were back then in the day. Now, auditing the whole deal of actions that are happening on your cloud data is a little more difficult, figuring out the integrity. And a user can very easily, if it's a rogue insider, we're talking about a rogue insider, they can very much plug in a thumb drive and get hold of the data and go away. Now, back in the day, it was difficult because you had clear-cut physical regulations that stopped your users from bringing in hard disks. That's a very big problem at the cost of better data availability, right? For the want of better data availability, your security principles are a little watered down, and that's a little disheartening. That's the case in most of the organizations as I speak. Now, again, it also goes without saying data integrity is of top priority. We'll understand why is it difficult to monitor data integrity and what's with the deal with confidentiality. Now, when it's confidentiality, it's all about privileged access. What is mission critical data for your organization? Because NIST recommends you to have a clear tab on what data is mission critical. Now, if you can get hold of that bit of it, following that up with the right access to the right users becomes a lot more easier. So we'll identify how to do data classification and why is it an important part of the NIST security framework, and how do you go about doing it. Same goes with data integrity. How do you not let users who's not supposed to have access in the first place tamper your data? Do you have a foolproofing mechanism that stops users from accessing critical corporate information? Now, while they're working remotely, there are chances that your users tend to make copies of these critical data on their endpoints as well, on their personal devices as well. Now, this is a very big challenge to battle, as a matter of fact, because all SIM solutions, most of them are aligned towards your network security, and now we are talking about endpoint security and data security in your endpoints as well. Now, that is a very tricky path to tread. So you will need a very clear-cut framework for data integrity too. It could be payroll data, it could be intellectual property, it could be some confidential business critical information, but you would need a system to monitor that. I'm basing all my argument around data security because throughout the NIST framework, and when someone's intending to follow the NIST framework, it's mostly because they want to comply to a regulation. And all these regulations that we talk about, HIPAA or GDPR or CCPA, or if you're joining from other parts of the world, we've got various regulations all centered around personally identifiable information, and how difficult it is going to be for organizations with the whole field that we're talking about right now. And availability, like I rightly pointed out a little while back, stopping your users with least privilege turns out to be advice that a lot of security folks get. Now, least privilege is definitely one of my favorite go-to options when back in the day when your network was well within your control. Now we are talking about distributed networks. Now we are talking about users joining from small offices and home offices and remote offices, whatnot. So how do you make data available without compromising security? Now, my simple recommendation, one-stop recommendation, is always to start with simple education. Now, through the course of last 120 days, we've been working with a lot of security leaders of different organizations around the world, and they've done a pretty good job putting together regulations or knowledge that has to be shared to their employees. And it's it's quite elaborate too. I've gotten hold of a couple of such frameworks that companies and organizations build for their employees. If you want access to any of them, just for reference, do let me know. I'll have them sent over to you. Now, why is all of this suddenly so important? Because attackers are taking advantage of the situation. You see constant increase in phishing attacks happening all through the pandemic, and all of them, like I pointed out earlier, are COVID theme, and they're getting away with it. Now, the problem is your users are very well educated that they're not supposed to click on an email that is malicious, but since they're COVID themed, it becomes easy for your attackers to get away. Now, the whole deal with mitigating this can be an easy way forward if NIST recommendations are in place, because most of the time NIST recommendations are all about foolproofing your security. Now, it's bound to happen. Now, you can't do anything about making your organization 100% secure. That's almost next to impossible. Only probably when you shut all your devices down can you call your organization to be close to 100% secure. I wouldn't even call that. Now, we're talking about a situation where the cost of these attacks is constantly going on. The risk that is associated with it is sky high. We're talking about organizations spending millions of dollars as we speak. Recently, there were many attacks. You know who I'm talking about. Many of them compromising not just employees' credentials, but also users and customers who signed up with them. Credit card information, banking details, and all of that gone even before you could recognize. Now, this is going up. You have numbers that all point towards the same direction, but this has been a constant problem all through course of time. Now, when there's a technology, there's going to be another technology to counter the technology, to probably like find loopholes in the technology. And this is an endless cycle where you build a technology and there's someone to crack it, and you build more stronger technology. This is how we roll, right? So what do? The panic is real. A lot of us are facing the heat. In fact, a few of clients with who I work personally have been under attacks, and we've tried to do the best to get them off it. So today what we'll discuss is, we've kind of understood right now that the cybersecurity landscape is messed up because of the whole remote working and the unpredictability that is associated with it. Now we'll go a little further, talk about how can we mitigate all of this, or at least contain the damage and try foolproof as much as possible with the NIST cybersecurity framework. Now, NIST, they've been around for quite some time now, almost about 100 years, if I'm not wrong. They're the National Institute of Science and Technology, and they've given out a cybersecurity framework. They've done a pretty good job with it, I'd say. One of my favorite go-to recommendations that I give for a lot of my clients. Now, as we speak right here, we've got the whole NIST framework put together and probably over 55 pages of verbiage. Now, the biggest challenge again with all these regulations is the clarity that is associated with it. How accessible is it for someone who's working on a project for compliance to get hold of the necessary data, to get hold of the necessary pointers and implement them? That is a big challenge with most of these regulations. Lots of verbiage, pages after pages, but NIST has done a good job consolidating them. But what I'm going to do through the session is to make it even simpler. Can I make it actionable? Because NIST gives you directions as to where you have to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to back these directions with real-time actions that you can go back after the webinar and implement at your place. That is the idea. We'll try to align to the NIST recommendations. The NIST cybersecurity framework, if I were to just give you some background, almost about 100-year-old organization. Major federal organizations talk about the FBI or CISA or the Homeland Security. They follow NIST recommendations in and out. They try to adhere to NIST recommendations. Not a must do, but definitely an easy way to get started if you're concerned about cybersecurity. Lots of organizations across the world also look up to NIST for their regulation. So what I've done is I've kind of consolidated critical functions in NIST into a very simple model. I call it the 5 core functions model. It starts with this. Now, through and through, if you go through, this is where NIST is heading at. Starting with identification, right? Figuring out where does the problem lie. Going a little further to talk about, now that you've found the problem, how do I safeguard it? What all measures do I take to foolproof my security? And after that, it's an endless cycle, right? No matter how hard you try to safeguard, there's going to be an external hacker or an insider who's going to try and do something fishy. Now, that's where your whole detection comes into the picture. And once you detect that something's going wrong, it can be a response that you'll need to have in place to mitigate that attack. It could be an automated response, as most of us prefer these days, or it could be even notifying the right stakeholders at the right time. The last bit of it is where if all else fail, what do you do to keep your business going? We're going to be talking about a disaster recovery plan. Now, through and through, I'm going to be giving you use cases and examples. We'll start with identification. Now, when it comes to identification, the NIST guidelines are very clear, giving you instructions as to what to look into for identification. They have laid it out very well, especially when we're talking about going further with figuring out where these vulnerabilities lie. The challenge is, how do you take into account the new situation that we are facing right now? That is the big challenge right now. So risk assessment isn't as easy as it used to be. Now we'll have to take into account multiple factors, starting with where do your new threats lie. Now, when there's an opportunity, when your users are moving to the cloud, and as if I rightly recall, most of the organizations that I work with have at least provision 3 to 4 new identities for their users. Now, these 3 identities do not mean 3 new opportunities to collaborate, but it means 3 new opportunities for an attacker to attack. So the threat is very real. And when it comes to identity security, most of the times it's just passwords that we are left with in most of these identity providers that we're talking about. Okay, I'll give you some more recommendations through the webinar, but it's mostly passwords that we all rely on. So identities can easily be compromised. For one, passwords aren't foolproof. For two, users tend to kind of be fatigued by the whole idea of many identities or multiple identities and tend to narrow down to a single password and have them across. So the threats are real with respect to identity security, and all that attacks that we keep hearing about recently are around business email compromise on Office 365 or account takeover attacks happening across organizations. So the threat is real and you'll need to identify what are these threats. We'll also talk a little bit about vulnerabilities that are in your existing system. Now, if you're an Active Directory organization, most of us who are joining, I'm guessing, would be organizations that have Active Directory as the central identity access management piece. There are real-time vulnerabilities, very easy access, just with basic credentials. Can someone get away with a lot of critical information? I'm not even talking about an attack compromising security. With just basic credentials, someone can get into your system, do a recon, understand who are the business stakeholders, get some PII also in the process. You're compromised. And we're also talking about the likelihood of something going wrong. How vulnerable are you and how can you assess your current postures? Another important point that I want to discuss. Now, most of the times when we're doing risk assessment, we are concerned about the vectors that we'll need to take into account, the endpoints that we need to secure, the potential landscapes where we are playing. But what we fail to do at times, and I keep reminding a lot of our folks, is the impact that it can have on business. Now, as we speak, IT is at the center stage, or in fact, it's at the very front of businesses and getting businesses to operate effortlessly and keeping the lights on for a lot of businesses. In our country right here, it's a lockdown. We're under a lockdown even today as we speak. So what do you do? IT has been the go-to option for a lot of conventional organizations that never really had that in place. So digital transformation is happening as we speak. A lot of them are making use of this opportunity to move forward, but it's a fast forward operation. And when you fast forward, a lot of things can go wrong. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security, if I rightly remember, around March, April, I think they gave away an updated documentation on Office 365 security. And why is it important that you have a checklist in place when you're migrating to Office 365 and what could possibly go wrong? Now, the DHS had to step in and it was that critical with the whole deal of account takeovers that were happening on Office 365. So the threat right here is real, and the business impact that it can have on your organization is something that you need to always consider. If there's discontinuity, if your systems are down, it's not just the reputation that we are talking about, your entire business can go extinct. There are many continuous process industries out there. I know folks from such industries are joining us today, where if you stop production for a couple of days, you're done. So what do you do about that? So the business impact is also something that we need to constantly assess. Now we have to orient ourselves, and this gets us a place in the board. Now we're talking about letting the right stakeholders know as to what sort of critical impact can it have. That is the idea. What needs to be protected is the next bit of it. Now, figuring out what is your mission critical data will help you go a long way. We're talking about prioritizing your whole security. I understand that it's not fair to say, one bit of it can't be more secure than the other, but turns out most of the cases, not being able to identify or not accounting what is mission critical data can be a problem. We're talking about business critical assets in your organization. Where do these attackers essentially target is where we are trying to start from. Now, when you're trying to do a risk assessment, having a data classification solution works in your favor. Having an e-discovery solution works in your favor, because identifying valuable assets, getting the right stakeholders to sign off on it is a difficult job. So documenting every aspect of your data security is important. Your data access governance, as we call it, is incomplete without figuring out where your mission critical data lies. It could be PII, it could be confidential information, it could be intellectual property, it could be company secrets, but it could even be something as simple as your employees' identities. Your employees would require to log in every day to continue business. So you will need to know what is important. And just in case if something goes wrong, the NIST regulation asks you to get the first thing right, which is to identify. The framework asks you to get your assessment done right. And that is my recommendation too. Now, going a little forward, we're talking about the likelihood of harm or loss and what impact can it have. Now, how quickly can you recover is also a factor that you'll have to take into consideration. So where does your threat lie? What are your critical assets? Where is your vulnerability from, or what are your existing systems lacking? That is exactly where your risk lies, and that is exactly where your attacker is going to target. I'm going to give you one quick moment to this is a simple table that I put together with respect to what data is how important. Now, data is the new gold, as we keep hearing that over and over. And it becomes very easy for attackers to get away with the data that we're talking about because of the whole chaos and the whole influx of volume of data that is being shared from within the network to outside and the other way around, because all of your employees are scattered and they're working from different locations. So this is a very critical problem at this point in time, and being able to figure out what is important over the other. I'm going to give you a minute to go through this. Usually, as I've seen in most of the cases, personally, identifiable information, especially the EHR category or electronic health record category, as we talk about, are gold mines for attackers. That's exactly where they want to go. That's the reason why, if you follow the news, you'd know there were a lot of attacks in the UK on the NHS. All right, group of hospitals run by the government, targeted over and over again consistently just to get hold of patient record right now as we speak. So that's a very big security problem that they're going through. Now, these are tough times, and hackers are trying to extort such information and ransoms out of organizations. That's a bad thing. So you will need to know how to get that in place and evaluate that asset over the other. Storing patient information is a classic case. Also, we're not just talking about healthcare information. Again, we're talking about a whole lot of it. We're talking about file integrity monitoring being at the center of it. It could be something as simple as intellectual property sent as attachments. It could be a documentation sent over Microsoft Teams. Now, tracking all of this is becoming very, very difficult, and hence a bird's eye view will give you all the difference. So our priority number one today for the framework is to identify where these vectors lie. And that being said, it is going to be impossible for you to go through all your event logs, as how complex it can sound. Event logs, tons and tons of event logs, just to find out a needle in the haystack, just to find out who was that attacker when you're doing a root cause analysis. And it becomes very difficult if you do not have the bird's eye view. And your system has to be trained and sophisticated enough to give you the story, but not the elements of it. I mean, yes, indeed, but when you get context associated with it, you'd know who are the users, you'd know what sort of access was given to those users, what were the accounts that were targeted, when did this happen, what's the whole timeline of the event, what was the reason, where was that first loophole. You will need to have story associated with the whole attack if that were to roll out. So being able to pinpoint to the ones that are most vulnerable and identifying the targets for your attackers is, in my point, the first and the most important step to do. You need to figure out who are the identities that are critical in your organization, what data is important in your organization, which endpoints and machines are the ones that are most valuable, files and servers and whatnot. So we're talking about having a three-dimensional approach right here and getting all of that together clubbed, not viewing data in silos, but putting them together in simple dashboards that give you the exact things that you need to be looking into. Again, when I'm talking about activity that is happening, we will need to have the provision to track user level activity, object level activity, access level activity, and what were the modifications made. And you would need out of the box alerts when things go wrong. It can be threshold based. for starters, but through the webinar, I'll give you one more tip that can kind of undo thresholds and give you a better perspective to how to stay on top of your system. Now, we're talking about security, SIEM solutions, information event management systems, all tuned towards working for your in-house users or on-prem users. What about once on the cloud? What about users using Office 365? Now, if you're one of those folks who recently moved to Office 365, I'd want you to take a minute to hear me out well. There's a dashboard called the Secure Score dashboard. It's accessible for you right now if you're on Office 365. Just probably open a quick tab and then have Secure Score searched, and you'd have access to a dashboard that gives you real-time information on what's your current security posture. Now, as we're talking about identifying vulnerabilities and potential mistakes in your configurations, where things can go wrong, Secure Score dashboard is where you'll need to go to if you're on Office 365 right now. And it gives you a very clear picture as to what is your posture, where are you with respect to the best practices, what is your score on a base score. Now, if someone, a few of you would be accessing the Secure Score dashboard as we speak. If you can drop your score on the chat, that'd be wonderful. Now, usually the Secure Score dashboard is a very dynamic dashboard that takes into consideration your current infrastructure and gives you a base score of probably somewhere like 500 to 700 based on how complex your environment is, and gives you pointers or action items that you'll have to implement to get your score up. And almost all of the times, if you see, the top on the list is around identity security. We're talking about identity security from an access standpoint. We're talking about identity security from an entitlement standpoint, who's got what privilege standpoint. And yes, I will also give you one more thing, which is multi-factor authentication. So if you're on your Secure Score dashboard, you'd know what's your score, and it'll give you the exact action items to be working on right away. So right after the webinar, if you can get to the dashboard, see where you stand, fill out a couple of gaps right there, you can get started with a better cybersecurity posture. The first recommendation for me for today's session is to identify where things can go wrong and where is our security posture a little weak. Identification is the first one, and having a bird's eye view to get information out of the box without having to wait can give you the heads start. The next proposal that I have for you, or the next part of the plan right here, is protection. Now, when it comes to protection, like I just mentioned, most of the times it's always identities that keep getting compromised. And right now, identities are the most vulnerable vectors in your entire security equation. Now, users are at the background of any identity, and they get to set their passwords. That's the only way out. And Active Directory password policies, as we speak, just generalizing right here, most of us are on AD. And in fact, for that matter, even the new platforms do not have the best in class password security in my point of view. It's always about complexity from a very fundamental standpoint, maybe rules that were okay 20 years ago. In fact, Active Directory password policies have not seen a change in the last 20 years. Now, Microsoft could have definitely done a better job right there. We're talking about 20 years of the same set of policies, and unfortunately, the fine-grained password policies, the best of the password policies that's available in Active Directory, isn't as fine-grained as it's supposed to be. So NIST recommends you to have a clear-cut protection mechanism in place for your identities. Now, identity security is a top priority, and a one-size-fits-it-all or a spray and pray approach isn't going to work, isn't going to get you anywhere. So we will need to look into the most common problems with respect to identity security here, passwords. Now, incremental passwords, since time immemorial, users have been getting away with incremental passwords. They're asked to reset a password when it's about to expire. All they do is just add a number or a character to it, and they get away with it. Your existing system cannot stop your users. Though there's password history, you might argue, but it does not stop an incremental password. So is the case with dictionary words. Now, how archaic is it to let your users have dictionary words as a part of their password? Doesn't really make sense. So that is a very strong vulnerability out there, and attackers love using dictionary attacks on organization. They get away easily, and they don't even need to try. So that's the whole disadvantage associated with the current policy. So we were trying to figure out what vulnerabilities exist in your system, just so that we can prevent something from going wrong. And the obvious loophole in your security system is password policies that aren't strong enough. And another NIST recommendation, if I were to rightly quote, is NIST requesting you to not have expiry as an option. Password expiry can look like a security best practice, but turns out back in the day, expiry was a good thing. But now it is out of context for the sole reason that the more the number of times your users are requested or are requested to reset their passwords, higher are the chances of them messing it up. Maybe with weaker passwords, maybe with predictable passwords, maybe with incremental passwords. In my point of view, as much as you can, cut off your users from having to enter passwords in as many number of platforms as possible. Now we're talking about reducing the number of chances for your users to, one, fall prey for a social engineering attack where they give away their credentials on a form that was not supposed to be there in the first place, or an attacker trying to take advantage of a weak password. So reduce the number of times your users have to reset their passwords. In fact, if you ask me, I turn off password expiry completely. As long as you have a strong password in place, expiry is redundant, doesn't make sense, right? So focus has to be on stronger password policies. That is my recommendation, and NIST recommends the same too, because we are talking about users. No matter what you do, no matter what best practice you give them, they are going to be doing something like this. So what do you do right there? Educate your users, number one. Like I pointed out earlier, if someone wants access to the frameworks that organizations have developed for their employees, the best practices that they're giving out, just in case if you need a copy of it, just write to me and I'll have that sent over to you. Now, there are multiple other problems like password spray, where it becomes easy for attackers to get away right now as we speak while working remotely. Now, as such, the logon activity, if you were to track, it is all erratic and all over the place, and you can't really pinpoint to a specific IP address in this specific situation where users are logging in from left, right, center, everywhere. In my company, it's all around the globe. So what do? Very difficult. And password spray attacks are one weak password sprayed across your entire network for one vulnerable user who must have used a weak password. Attackers get away with it almost all the time, and hence I would want you to take a moment to evaluate how unsafe the current posture is. Attackers, just with one access, just with one credential compromise, within a matter of 2 days, can get to your domain admin credentials. It is that easy. And this is, mind me, an infographic given out by Microsoft. Just takes 48 hours for an attacker to infiltrate into your system, do a complete recon, find out where are your critical resources, map them, have a strategy to exfiltrate data, and it becomes almost impossible to find out where are these attackers exfiltrating data to, when are they doing it, because it's all concealed in the whole lot of data transfer that's happening back and forth in your organization while your users are working remotely. So attackers have a field day right now because they're going to target on critical accounts. They're going to start exfiltrating data in very small packets, not raising any flags or alarms. And by the time they're out of your organization, it is most of the times very disheartening to know that they have not even been detected. In the last 3 months, this is the biggest challenge. After the attackers left the organization, when something's gone missing is when organizations are detecting that there's a problem, and hence strong password policies are your first line of defense. We're talking about the first line right here, where we stop users from making predictable passwords. Now, we're talking about preventing patterns. It could be a keyboard waltz, like a QWERTY, QWERTY, or a 1, 2, 3, 4. Dictionary words are quite obvious. Stop them from using dictionary words. And password length, again, requires certain attention to it. In my opinion, if I were the one setting password policies, I'd recommend users to set pass phrases. They are much more stronger than any other option out there. With every additional character, with every additional letter, number, or special character, the entropy grows exponentially, and hence the need of an enforcer, something that can sit on top of your existing identity platform and stop your users from setting weak passwords. Now, it could be something as simple as this. Now, why not reverse the idea and have dictionary words stop from your passwords? The attackers go online, find a dictionary attacking tool, something like an Hydra, download a dictionary, have that on your system, like execute such an attack on your system. Why not you do the same thing? Install a dictionary, have a software that plugs in all such holes in your organization, stops your users from setting any dictionary words. That is the idea. So we're kind of trying to reverse the whole game right here by stopping users from having any passwords that are from the dictionary. And if you ask me how this works, it sits on top of your current identity provider, no matter be it Active Directory, no matter be it Office 365, you can have it configured to strengthen the existing password policies, and they stop your users from using dictionary words, become unpredictable right away. patterns that are common to your organization, maybe name of your organization, maybe patterns common to the user itself, the first name, predictable things like their date of birth, all of that can be stopped with smart patterns. And based on research that we conducted, turns out there are not more than 450 patterns that every user out there would probably use. Now, it's quite surprising that how predictable humans are, and attackers take advantage of this exact uh, trait of human beings to be predictable. Now, we might think that we've got the strongest pattern in mind. People tend to make passwords, they have syntax done for their passwords, and once one is down, the entire security is down. So can you stop users from using predictable patterns? Yes, that's checked. Can you disallow users from using words from previous passwords? Absolutely, you can try that as well. And my favorite always will be to set long passwords that are passphrases, best possible option. And in the process, mind me, the challenge right here will be, if you are in the process, in the pursuit of implementing something like this, the biggest challenge is going to be adoption. Your users are going to have a tough time adhering to these new policies that you give them, and hence I recommend to make it as easy as possible. Where would your users be looking for this? The problem with Microsoft is they give you options, but they do not give you notifications. Even with the whole deal with password expiry, what do we have? We have a pop-up that says your password's about to expire. And when was the last time we ever read a Microsoft Windows pop-up? It's void. Nobody uses that anymore, and that's definitely a problem. So is the case with notifying a user that when they're trying to reset their passwords, they haven't met the complexity requirement. So get the complexity requirement right where your users are logging in, right where they're resetting in, have it displayed on the logon screen. Another recommendation, we're talking about responding to attacks. Now, the first thing to do is to make it easy for your users so that they don't fall prey for setting weak passwords. Easy options right here is to set stronger password policies and make it accessible and available for your users. Usability versus security is always a challenge. Try to nail the balance that way. Now, no matter how hard I try to convince you or convince anybody for that matter with respect to passwords and strong passwords, they aren't almost all the time like foolproof. And an easy way to overcome that limitation based on the recommendation given by NIST 2 is to enable multi-factor authentication or a single sign-on. Now, single sign-on is more like my add-on. The NIST recommendation stops with MFA. Now, why MFA? Now, we're talking about a personalized factor, like a possession factor, like a knowledge factor. It could be anything. It could be a physical device, or it could be a knowledge factor where it's out of memory, but it makes it very difficult. Turns out 95% of your security problems pertaining to identities are eliminated if you have a multi-factor authentication in place. Trust me, there are options available out there. If you're on Azure, let's say, you can very easily adopt Microsoft Mobile Authenticator. It's absolutely available for free. You can get your users to start using Microsoft Mobile Authenticator, or you can look at other solutions out there, because right now, the biggest challenge is implementation and onboarding users into new solutions. The easiest way to do is to make it available on platforms right where they're looking for it. It could be a second factor that is as simple as a touch ID or a face ID. Look for solutions that can integrate into your existing environment without much friction. That is the biggest recommendation that I have for you. Enable multi-factor authentication. If you've not done it, do it right away. If you're on your Office 365 Secure Score dashboard, that is the first recommendation that gets you almost about 50 points on a base score of 500 points. Now, you'd understand how important MFA is with that just one sentence. Now, we're talking also about single sign-on, and single sign-on is more like my personal recommendation or my personal take. Why? Now, we were talking earlier about one NIST recommendation, which is to asking users to enter their passwords as least as possible. And single sign-on, in my opinion, is the best possible way to implement that. Now, when we're talking about users having to remember multiple passwords, that's where all problem starts. They start setting weak passwords, right? So how do you counter that is the question. And my obvious go-to solution always is single sign-on. And it'd be much better if you can have single sign-on right at the logon. Now, Windows authenticated single sign-on, NTLM single sign-on can be like a really cool function just while they are accessing after their first factor of authentication, which is the strong passwords that you've already got them to set, followed by a second factor of authentication based on the MFA that you've set. Now that they've successfully authenticated themselves twice, give them access to applications without them having to enter credentials. Another major problem right now is a lot of inside applications or internal applications in your organization are hosted over the internet. And these internal applications were never meant to be built with security first, right? That is the whole idea. These are internal applications within your perimeter. Now, your firewall had the job of protecting them, your SIM solutions had the job of protecting them, whatnot. You had other mechanisms to protect. But now that there are a lot of applications that are accessed by users over the internet, internal applications now in internet facing, you'd need to be double sure of making it as less as possible for your users to enter their credentials. They would enter their credentials. In fact, if you were to have followed the news, there was this one big CEO of a company, not naming, who had entered his Office 365 credentials on a Google form. So attackers can get away with such easy tricks. Now, how is that supposed to be stopped? Now, administrators, IT folks can educate your users as much as possible, but my best bet is to foolproof it. Do not give them an option for them to make a mistake. That is, remove the access or remove the action that they'd be doing, and that's the best way possible. So MFA and single sign-on are other recommendations to protect your identity security. Like I pointed out, if you have flexibility with what options you have, nothing better than that. You can look for a couple of options. Security questions are a little archaic, but they still work because it's a knowledge factor. Text messages are again not my great recommendation. I would not recommend text messages or notifications because how text messages appear on your notifications and attackers can get away with them. Look for more concrete options like, let's say, Face ID or Touch ID. Now, you would argue it's definitely arguable, but we're talking about what makes it easy for your users, right? They already have that possession with them, and having that integrated makes it absolutely secure. Physical security devices like YubiKey, absolutely, but now implementing that should be a challenge for the want of remote working and whole logistics that is associated. So make it easy for your users with options that they already have. Hypothetically speaking, if your administrator credential got compromised, you shouldn't be really worrying, because right when the attacker enters the password trying to enter into your organization, there's a wall that they hit, and this wall is a verification code that gets sent to the administrator's email ID. Now, this can be a great advantage if organizations are working remotely where credentials are being shared. Now, you cannot really contain the whole idea with credential sharing. Service accounts that have certain privileges on and off, they need to be shared. I mean, they get shared, not that they need to be, but they get shared. And most of the times we forget about it afterwards. So having a second factor of authentication can kind of stop that trouble, and a lot of other problems that are to follow too, especially for your critical stakeholders like administrators or ones with the keys to your kingdom. So being able to protect your organization, especially from an identity standpoint, starts with setting up strong password policies, is followed up by setting up multi-factor authentication for your users, and there you go. That's my second recommendation for you, pointing us towards the next one, which is detection. Now, what do you do now? Detection is a whole another game. We've been trying to get on top of the system and detect attacks as they happen. But now with the whole remote working, remote access, VPN, firewall rules, lots to take into consideration, and having a very comprehensive auditing system that audits your VPN data, that audits your VPN access, that audits every file system folder out there, workstations, endpoints, is what we need. So end-to-end auditing that all is correlated is my simplest recommendation. It might seem to be a lot to ask, but then there are solutions out there that get the job done right. Native tools, they lack many functionalities big time. Look for solutions that can bring together a CASB effect, a cloud access security broker effect, and can talk to your identity access management solution, can talk to your SIM solution. Now, if all of these solutions can work together, you would definitely be having the advantage over the attacker. Why? Something as simple as a brute force attack can be called out instantaneously. Now, we're talking about a brute force attack. Let's say if you had logon auditing turned on, in terms of logon auditing, okay? A brute force attack is repetitive logon failures happening in under, let's say, less than a minute, 100 logon failures in less than a minute, followed by one successful logon. and the user goes on to install an application on a file or a server for the first time, and then there's exfiltration of data that's happening, data packets getting sent back and forth. If you were to look at all of these events, log on failure, log on success, application being installed, a file or a folder being accessed, a server being accessed, when these events are looked at separately, they do not make a lot of sense, which is the biggest problem with your event viewer. It does not give you context. When you can put all of this together contextually, give your users the insight that they'd want, more of the business impact that it would have in figuring out who's the user initiating all of this. Is it an insider? Is it an attacker? From which IP is it? That is the kind of auditing, and that is the kind of notifications that you should be receiving. It all boils down to having a strong user behavior analytics module in place. And we're talking about just one example where I broke down brute force in terms of log on activity auditing and monitoring. It gives you a great stretch in finding out who or where or when or how did the attack initiate. Let me skip a point and talk about island hopping. Now, island hopping is a classic case. Attackers do not want to stop with just initial foothold. They want to go do a complete recon of your organization, and trust me, with just basic privileges, need not be a critical account in your organization, just with basic privileges in Active Directory and a couple of PowerShell scripts or LDAP queries for that matter, attacker can get PII inside your organization, personally identifiable information of users, of their phone numbers, of their email IDs, of their user accounts, of a lot that is associated is already exposed, because by default every user has the read privilege over a lot of attributes in your infrastructure over your users, over other users, and makes it easy for them to find out where to target, where to attack, which endpoint to next compromise, until they get hold of the domain admin, and even before you know, your entire security has come down. So my recommendation to you again would be to have a clear-cut auditing mechanism in place. That is your go-to solution if you are looking at securing and protecting from an attack, which is what we intend to do in the third step. So how do you detect? How do you protect? Right? That is the whole right here. Now that you've detected, you'll have to also take into consideration that there are many platforms to look into, both cloud and on-prem. So look at having a strong auditing mechanism in place. We've done identification where we figured where the vulnerabilities reside. What are the new vulnerabilities that have come up? We've spoken about how to protect identities with MFA and stronger password policies. We saw how to detect in case of a security problem or an issue with strong monitoring solutions in place, and how context can play a very important role in calling out false positives over the right ones. Detection. Now response. Now when it comes to response, you will want to mitigate the threat as it hits your organization. So how do you do it? Now the simplest thing to do is to have predetermined responses for a lot of these common attacks that are out there. Simple things would be to just cut off the user, log them off, terminate their session. If it's a ransomware, contain and disconnect the sessions from the network. Many such inbuilt actions are defined in a lot of tools out there. So mitigating threats starts with just the instantaneous action that you can take with your existing system. So if your system is smart enough to do that, it's more like first aid before you can start actually investigating on what's going wrong. When it's about anomaly detection, when it's about root cause analysis, figuring out that something is wrong, it's all about context, it's all about correlation, it's all about getting your pointers in the right direction, because most of the time attackers leave breadcrumbs all over the place. It becomes difficult to pinpoint where exactly did it start from. So having that level of visibility into your environment as to why was it anonymous, or why was it anomalous, why was it anomalous, is the idea that I want to let you know. In terms of activity, in terms of volume, in terms of the time of the day, in terms of the geography from where they are accessing, it all boils down to tracking all of that. And especially privileged users are the target right here. So you will need to get out of the box priority notification when privileged accounts are accessing a file or a folder for the first time, or making an installation for the first time. When a privilege is used in bulk, you will need to know, and that can happen only when you have context associated with it, because it's impossible to determine based on preset values. So right here, my system notifies me saying that this user who had the privileges all along, all of a sudden has performed 10 user management activities, while his usual or her usual is 0. So this is the kind of solution that you'll need to be looking for in terms of preventing a privilege abuse. So we're talking about the next part, which is to respond to an attack. And when you're responding, the quicker you do with the clear context that you have is what will differentiate how quickly can you get your systems back. So receive notifications right on time on unauthorized access over privileged accounts in terms of the volume of activity is quite important. Goes with malicious logins too. Right after they put themselves into critical groups, you would know that there is unusual log on activity. You'd know most of these attacks happen in non-business hours. It says this user who usually accesses from, let's say, 10 to 6, all of a sudden is accessing at 6 a.m. in the morning. This is an anomalous behavior while the user was not supposed to access this file or a folder because it does not even belong to that department. So such contextual business first insights can get you to the root cause ASAP. It's all about getting there before the attacker and stopping the attack from going any further. So preventing an attack is majority about detecting it really quick and responding it with an automated incident response system. So look for solutions that have pre-built threat intelligence. It could be threat intelligence from a standpoint where you can stop logins from malicious IP addresses. You have network reputation scores out there. You have user behavior analytics also that can work in your favor to detect if there are any risky users or risky logons. We're talking about baselining every user based on their past activity and detecting malicious logon. Now, if you ask me, how does my system know that it's malicious? It's because there's machine learning at the background of it that learns every behavior of every user out there, right? And it's based on context, it's based on past data, it's based on the accesses that they've done before, and if there are any deviations, you can detect them real quick. So that is the next part. And the last one right after response is recovery. Now, this is a classic case. A simple example for doing it right would be a 3-2-1 backup recovery rule. My most favorite recommendation to a lot of folks joining is the 3-2-1 backup rule. At any given point in time, you'll have to have 3 copies of your data, 2 of which are stored in different physical media, and 1 of it which is stored in a different geographical location altogether. If all else fails, you'll have the one that's residing in a different geographical location, maybe within the country based on the laws, maybe in a server outside, maybe in a cloud storage. You can pick and choose. So the 3-2-1 is a go-to rule that I give administrators when they're trying to put together a data recovery strategy. It has to do a lot with stakeholders because NIST requires you to recover ASAP and notify users of an attack. So recovering on time with a very stringent RTO and RPO, as we call it, risk point objective and risk time objective. So we'll need to recovery point objective and recovery time objective are the ones that you'll need to take into account. How quickly can you get your systems back on track? What minimal business impact does it have? Because all of these regulations, no matter if it's a natural disaster or a human error or an accidental deletion or a cybersecurity attack, it all boils down to you paying huge fines, be it these regulations that you violate or the reputation of your organization lost. So it is important for you to be able to restore the availability of mission critical data right after an attack happens. And that again brings me to the first point of data and how important it is to classify data, to know what is high available data, what is machine critical data, so that you can get your systems back on track ASAP without having to wait for every sort of data to be recovered. A lot of regulations and recommendations also point you to the same direction. Gartner, Forrester, all of these organizations require you to do that. They recommend you to have regular backups set. Look for applications, because in-house internal applications, be it Active Directory or Office 365, they have tons of native limitations when it comes to how can you archive your data in terms of storage, in terms of bandwidth, in terms of the tenuity of the storage, multiple loopholes out there in the existing system. So look for a solution that can effectively do the job. AD360 is the managed engine solution that can get the NIST regulations that I was talking about. You can get started with AD360. That's the tool that we were showing screenshots of through the day. And yes, I'd want to talk about one last point. I've tried to pack as much as information today in the webinar. Guys, the webinar is recorded, so do not worry. If you want the copy of the webinar, if you want to listen to a specific bit over again, you can absolutely do that. I'd conclude my webinar with this one sum up slide where I've put together all these regulations given by all these recommendations given by NIST in terms of identifying protection, detection, response, and recovery. I've kind of covered ground through this entirety. We're talking about understanding your business environment, finding out what's the right data access governance should you be doing, having a proper risk assessment strategy in place, being aware of what are the risks and educating your users. Awareness and training a major part. These are all NIST recommendations, so do take into account how easy and important it is, how important it is to implement these regulations, recommendations to comply to your regulations. We're talking about out of the box integration with tools that are on data security, that are on data access governance, that are on CASB, which is cloud access security brokering, all working in favor to protect your data. So goes for detection, where you need to pinpoint to anomalies, spot them before they could become worse, have a clear-cut response mechanism, communicate to the right stakeholders, again, very important with alerts, analyze the data so that you can get to the root cause of it, have a very clear-cut disaster recovery plan in place with a strong recovery system in place, right? So we understand that these are tough times, and handling all of these challenges with native tools can be a very big challenge. So do write to me. I'm available for you for questions. My email ID is right there on the screen. You've been such a lovely audience, and I honestly hope today's webinar was of some help. I'm looking forward to your emails, your questions, the resources that I was talking about. I've got a comprehensive list of 25 event IDs that I've put together, all of them Active Directory event IDs that you need to track and audit if you're working remotely, right? If you would want to comply to these regulations, the 25 list of event IDs is what you can write to me, and I'd be more than happy to share with you. The webinar was recorded. If you want a copy, you've got my email address. Please do send me an email, a quick email, and I'd have the webinar recording sent. We've also put together other resources. Let me quickly check if I can show that to you. A few other resources right here around remote working, right? Just give me one quick second. I'm going to give you links to these resources too. A little later, you can write to me for these resources. On your screen is the data security resource that we've got on all data best practices. So you can very much have access to these. And I have the NIST cybersecurity framework also, an abridged version of the NIST cybersecurity framework that I've put together. Pretty much a sum up of what today's presentation deck is, but with action items. A couple of recommendations, just if I were to quickly remind you, we were talking about password security, implementing MFA, having two-factor authentication in place, having the Office 365 secure dashboard done right, and having a clear-cut backup solution. Guys, you've been such a lovely audience. Thank you for your time. If you have questions, I'm right here to take them. The webinar was recorded. Please drop me an email with any questions that you have on identity access management and cybersecurity. Thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience.